Okay, we have got a lot of people here today, and I think it's fine to start with today's agenda. And so today's agenda is mainly about two parts, and the second part will go on depending on the section, the time cost for the first section, because I have go over with the first agenda, and I see that this problem is pretty interesting and worth discussion for a long time. So it might take some time to discuss with Daniel and other people about the catalog issue. And if there's no time left, I will move the second agenda to weeks later, together with the load testing part. So Daniel, just take your time, and it did not need to be hurry. So just talk everything you want. Okay, so I think you can share the screen now. And today's first agenda is talking about the catalog issue brought by Daniel. And you can share your screen or start anything you want now.
Okay, let me see, because I think I need to get this on options. I don't know if I need to reconnect.
Okay.
Let me try. One sec. Okay, I will reconnect.
I think Daniel is going for a reconnection. Yeah, let's wait a few more minutes. Fogg, I was wondering that can you see the captions now?
Okay, let me see now if I can do it. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
I think
can you see my screen?
Goes great. Correct.
Okay. So basically, this issue is a long time issue that we started discussing and got stuck, let's say, somehow, and we evolved it differently. So basically, this comes from this issue on the OAM spec, where we started discussing like the importance of having a catalog for applications. So what I've done is I have tried to prepare a small document to basically to jumpstart the discussion, which is the document that is linked in the meeting. So take this document as a starting point. Nothing is written on stone here. It's always open for discussion. So basically, to go briefly around it, what I've done is, okay, first of all, let's try to define what we are trying to accomplish. And the idea here is to provide a catalog that people will use similarly to how you use, for example, the Docker registry, where you upload your containers and then you are able to pull it and to run them directly from the catalog. So this is quite a similar idea in the sense of providing a method for the specification to support this type of packaging, let's say, of an OAM application, and then offering a solution for integration with development platforms in such a way that you will be able to check the catalog. Imagine that we as a community have a centralized catalog for everyone to use. People should be able to upload their applications there and then basically deploy it from there. So the idea here is like threefold, I will say. First of all, having a catalog with predefined applications, I think it will speed up the adoption of KubeVela by new people, because instead of having just an empty cluster, and once you install all the system, you still need to learn how to represent an application or something like that. You will be able to connect to the catalog and start deploying application and experiencing, let's say, the new structure. This will also serve the purpose of having real examples so that people, when they are creating their own applications, they can check out how other people basically are defining their applications and which extensions they are using. From the point of view of an organization, we, as in Native, we have talked with several companies, and one of the common problems, let's say, is having an inventory of which applications they are running and which versions they are running. So this will also provide a method to similarly how they store their containers, let's say images in a registry, they will do the same for YAML files containing applications and versions, so that we can think of, for example, a company having their own private catalog, let's say, and you will upload all the versions of your application so that every team in the organization can understand which applications are ready, available, and can be deployed. And instead of having to look through different Git repositories to look for YAMLs and how to compile them, you will have kind of a centralized place also to do that, right? So all of that combined basically also enables you to kind of have more of a GitOps extension, if you wish, in the sense of we can also think about in the future triggering operations based on events on the catalog, such as publishing new versions or modifications on the versions or things like that. So this is kind of the overall context for this functionality. We are trying to define how we can bring an application catalog that can be integrated in different platforms. And after that, what I did is try to write down some, say, high-level requirements or something like that, in the sense of what we are trying to imagine before we build it. So one thing that was also on the original issue was, let's try to define a kind of metadata entity so that people can have an easy way to define, like, where are the documentation for the application, which is the repo, which is the description, which are the tags that facilitate searching it, licenses, and all of that. Let's have a README file so that it is easy for people to package instructions about how you will use the application, or if you need to do something. For example, in our case, some applications will write down a login token on the logs. So you need to have a place to tell people, like, hey, once you deploy it, go to the logs, check get the login token and use it to log in the application. That will be, let's say, from the point of view of which entities we are willing to add to the OAM specification. From the point of view of the interface, I will say the easiest way is to try to be similar to something that people are already familiar with, which in this case is more related to these two actions, like being able to interact with the catalog in a similar way you interact with a Docker registry. The packaged content should be able to contain OAM and standard Kubernetes entities, because I think we shouldn't limit this to a specific type of entity and let people also try to extend and use the catalogs as they wish. Just to put an example here, we have a catalog running in the Native Playground, and we are seeing people using the catalog for things like storing their own component definitions, so that they just, let's say, instantiate that and create that in the namespace before starting to deploy applications. Other people just get standard applications, or they just package, let's say, just config maps and things like that for configuration or generic configuration for the applications. So I will try to be more on the open side here and try to think about, we are going to package something that should be deployable in a Kubernetes cluster with KubeVela installed. I think it's also important to have the notion of private and public applications, so that when you upload something, you will define the visibility of it. That will enable us to have public catalogs for everybody to get their applications and use them, and will also be a place to store your own application that only you or your organization or your team is able to deploy and unlock to. And yeah, just I added some mention also to things that we should be aware when implementing a solution, which is, I think it will be good if we have some type of pluggable authentication mechanisms, so that when you instantiate the catalog, you say how you want to authenticate the commit request, that being with tokens, with LDAP, with any other mechanism that you may be using in your platform. Deploying private cloud catalogs, I think, is also important, especially for companies that they may use the public one, let's say for common applications, but you may need to deploy your own, the same as you are doing with a Docker registry. And also another thing that we thought about is it will be nice if we can have also kind of deploy to pluggable targets, let's say for the catalog. So if you are, for example, browsing the catalog and looking for an application, having a place to say, hey, I want to deploy this application into this particular platform, that being your own installation, that being a third-party plugin, something like that, right? So we can have central catalogs that interact with many different type of platforms, okay? So that will be more on the what we are thinking about requirements for these entities. And then what I did is to try to put some references into what is right now available to see how we can merge this and evolve it for the future. So one of the initial elements is the KubeVela add-on catalog, which has some nice features. Is we already have here kind of a metadata entity, as you wish. So you will be able to read this metadata and check, for example, provide tags for looking for add-ons, or put requirements into which system is the minimum requirements to run this particular add-on, okay? The way that we interact with this right now is either through the Vela UX, where you can go and install the different add-ons that you want, or through the CLI, basically enabling the different add-ons in your cluster. The main difference that we find with this catalog specification right now is that it is more oriented to storing, let's say, add-ons extensions for the platform, and it's not targeting user applications. So I think that bringing the user application into context and allowing even to say like, hey, we have, I don't know, special tags or something like that to distinguish between this may be an add-on for the platform, this may be just an application. That is also something for discussion here to see how we can have both of them coexisting, if we think that that could be useful to even have more control on that. And we also in Active have our own catalog that was born based on the previous issue also. The way that we interact with the catalog, as you can see here, is pretty similar to what you can do basically with Docker registry. This is an open source project, so all the code is open in those two repositories. You want to check it out. The way that you deploy things is basically, this is related with the deploy to option that I mentioned. You can basically say, hey, I want to deploy this application by name in this particular environment. Consider this as a namespace if you wish, and in this particular installation. Those are optional, but that's the way that you can deploy an application somewhere. You can go through the web UI and just search for your application, click deploy, and it will be deployed. What you can see here around there is like the first part that we show is the metadata contents of what we read from the metadata that is provided by the user. And the second part is just the README with instructions on how to use it, okay? Yeah, so those are like the two, let's say, references for OEM catalogs right now. Obviously, there are a lot more catalogs for things such as Helm and things like that we can try and look for it if we have, if we need another type of ideas or to compare the proposed solutions. I added on the last part of the document kind of a more detailed proposal of things. One of them is like a discussion around how we are going to name the stuff in the catalog. I took our initial approach because I wrote it, so I was trying to reuse it. My idea initially based on what you find in a Docker registry is to use a similar naming method in which you may want to put a URL for the catalog that you are referring to when pulling images. In this case, we're pulling or deploying applications to you. the namespace will be like the organization or your username, depending on how you have configured your system, like which is the authentication mechanism and things like that. And then we will have like an application name and a tag. Okay. There are some open questions related to whether this is an application as a conceptual entity or is more like a package. I think we just need to go through it and find a way of naming it. But yeah, we should have a proper naming for this. And then we related to the metadata. I just merged what is available on the KubeVela add-on catalog with our metadata specification. And that could be something like, well, that should be more like OAM, something like that. We will have a YAML readable by the system. Like it should be also treatable as a CRD if we want to do stuff with it. Naming, description, keywords, licenses, some URLs for documentation and pointing people to the project. A section to get some requirements, such as to deploy this application, you will need this trait available in your system, or this scope, or something like that, or this policy. Maybe this was written more on the other type of on the previous version of OAM. Things like I want a Kubernetes entity to exist because I need it, or more like system restrictions, like we need this minimum Kubernetes version, we need this Vela version to run this application, and also some law that is able to can be used basically when we define the catalog for people to be able to recognize like the applications. So yeah, that will be like what I imagine an application metadata will contain. In terms of packaging, this could be something pretty similar to what you do in Helm, for example. Like you have a directory with your application, you put every file that you wish in the order that you want, and then you just package it and deploy it as a zip file or something like that. And that will be it. Like I know this is quite a lot to digest. I just put this document for review to the public today, so I don't expect to have like right now answers on it. I think it's good to comment about it, about providing some context. And my idea will be like to leave some time for discussion. If anybody has any question right now about it, take your time and digest it, and we can continue the discussions both on the community calls and on the issue itself or the catalog. Some questions that we need to think about from this discussion is, well, somebody already commented on it, it's about these conceptual application entities and whether this fits with this naming or not. And the other one is in terms of packaging, if we think that this metadata and README file should be in a specific directory on the package. That could simplify some implementations and some UI implementations. So yeah, that's it from my side. I don't know if anyone has a question already on this.
Cool. Let's see if there's any questions. Also, I have some questions as well. So I think anyone, if interested in raising questions, feel free to raise it. And Daniel, I have some simple questions for the design. Okay, so for the packaging layout, if I'm understanding it right, so the OAM entity.yaml and the Kubernetes entity.yaml contains some like native Kubernetes objects like deployments or config map or other things.
Yeah, this could be a config map, for example, and that could be an application or a component definition, something like that.
Okay, I see. So when the user wants to deploy this application into the cluster, does it mean that the entity contained in in this layout, this packaging layout should also be delivered to the cluster, to Kubernetes?
Yeah, so
okay.
for example, we are seeing people in our catalog having like, they define their own component definition, for example, and they define an application that make use of that component definition, and then package it everything. So you will need to create all the entities. And what we have done internally is that we have also set some order. So for example, component definitions or any definition is created before creating any application.
Okay, I see. So what about the metadata.yaml? Will the application meta this object be delivered to the cluster, or just some metadata things in the describe the application package?
Well, I mean, when I say no and yes, consider this as my experience. So what we do internally in our catalog implementation is that those two files are only used for enabling searching and navigating through the catalog. So metadata and README files are not created or not attempted to be created in the target cluster. So that's why I was saying, like, maybe having a metadata directory is a cleaner solution to avoid trying to create, for example, a metadata file somewhere else in the cluster.
Okay, I see. Because when I asking this question, I was thinking that like previously we have some integration with the backstage part. And in the backstage part, there is something we are trying to do is like adding extra metadata to applications, like to add the organization description, the owner, and also in Vela UX, we are also facing a similar question, is that we want to define the applications like belongings, like the project it belongs to. Although it is possible for Vela UX because it has such metadata fields in the database, but in the controller parts, there is nothing for it. Or in other words, we can only use the annotation to add those information. So there is some needs for adding making descriptions for the metadata of application. Yeah,
I have not thought about it, but I think it could be a good idea even to try to say, as you see, because from the point of view of let's say the users that just know that there is an application running, having metadata available, like which is the documentation for this or something like that, could be useful. So I think it could be a good idea to try to reduce, let's say, this metadata and kind of define what will be set, let's say, when you instantiate the names, and what could be just taken from the definition of the user.
Yeah,
that could be a nice addition.
Yeah, and also for the application packaging, will it be able to like to use templates or adding like overlays for the values inside, or does it just snapshots of a concrete application and it does not need any extra parameters?
From my point of view, I see this more like as the final published version of an application, instead of like, I will not see this as you take this, run, customize on it, and then deploy it. Like, I see this more like you want to publish a specific version, the same as you publish a container image with a specific version. I think of this packaging more like on this side.
Yeah, cool.
Like you will have the parameters of the application itself.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if you have some parameters to use, the position of the packaging will be pretty similar to the add-on parts, or function. The function will be very similar, but if we leave those parameters out of this package and let it be a final part, I think it will be very different from the add-on things.
Yeah, one thing that we do in our implementation is like, well, it's not the implementation, it's more like the receiving end of the implementation, is that imagine that you deploy this package, we offer the user the possibility of modifying the parameters in the application before the final deployment stage. But that could be done, let's say, on the receiving end of the catalog, not on the catalog itself.
So there is another like middle stage storage for the application between the packaged catalog and the deploying of the application.
No, what I mean is that when you send this to the I mean, that could be like directly the Kubernetes cluster, and you will create this with kubectl. But if you do it through other platforms such ours, you can, let's say, hey, I'm taking this application from this catalog and deploy it. Do you want to rename the application, for example? That could be done in the other place. Like this is more, I see this more on the deploy operation than on the catalog itself.
So will the fields inside the application be mutable during this part, or only the name of the application can be changed?
We allow the people to change the name and the parameters if they wish, but this is on the deploy operation. It's not on the, we do not alter the contents of the catalog.
Okay. Yeah.
So for example, imagine that you have here like an application that is called My WordPress. We offer the possibility for people when you say catalog deploy WordPress version 124, whatever, minus name, my specific WordPress. We allow that on the deploy operation that takes elements from the catalog and push them to another place.
Okay, I see. And I see Fog is in the meeting room, and we have just discussed a scenario that in KubeVela we are using recently, is that because KubeVela now has workflow runs, so we have some actions like applying applications in the workflow rounds, so that within a workflow round we can apply multiple applications. But when using the apply app workflow step, we have a requirement is that we need to store the application to deliver as a config map inside the cluster. So it can be seen as a packaged application stored in the Kubernetes. And I think it could be one of the alternative source for the catalog, as you mentioned that there could be multiple protocols to support.
Yeah. I mean, I think that once we have a catalog, I see that, like, for example, you could have components referencing just elements from the catalog of workflow steps, deploying elements directly from the catalog. Like you could have a workflow when you say deploy application, this one by name, like just using this approach. You know, let's say, hey, my workflow is deploy this application, this other application, and this other application, and take them from the catalog directly.
Yeah, Fog, do you have any idea?
I have a question actually. So what will happen if we use the command called catalog pull something? Will it like download the metadata from the Git repository and store in the file system?
What our implementation downloads the whole package, so when you do a catalog pull, you basically will have these all these files compressed as a gzip file.
Oh, okay. So it is stored in the like file system of the users.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that could be like if you want to pull from one catalog and upload to another catalog, something like that. So yeah, pull downloads basically the contents from that application and version to your local file system.
Okay, so I see. If I want to use this in my workflow, I can first use this command or something like that to put the whole metadata in the file system, or I can see a PVC, a volume claim in my step or in the pod, and the next step I can use the files in the volumes and to deploy it. So
yeah,
it's the process, right?
yeah, or you could just take the file and keep it in memory, like the compressed file, and recreate the entities from there.
Okay, I see.
Another question.
Can you explain for me what the ops directory is? I don't follow the ops directory with the OAM and KS entities in it.
Yeah, well, that maybe isn't, well, you're correct, but this is out of context probably. That was just to represent that people could store their application in the shape and form that they want. Like if they want to have a separation between directories, they could do that. So
I see. Okay, no, that makes
imagine
sense.
that you want to have like all my configuration in here. I have a directory that is config for me. And it's just to be able to adapt to the way that people like to store things.
I see. I get that, because if it's a really simple thing, you would just have one file. You don't need directories. If it's complex, you need more. My other question is, I like the flexibility of defining raw KS entities, like you gave the example above, but I don't know, is that right? Because KubeVela deploys OAM apps, right? And if people need those things, they can define traits or components as they need to generate them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I like the idea you can do KS directly, because people will just do that and not bother with the OAM. Just slam it together. Yeah.
To give you more context about why that exists, let's say there are three types of elements that are, let's say, more commonly used for that, which is like config map and secrets, that people tend still to use it, and also for volumes, which is some people liking to define like their persistent volumes and things like that there, and then just connecting them to the own spec. It's more like, as I see it, it's more for config map and secrets. But I agree with you, like there is a risk of people saying like, hey, I want to store everything deployment.
So I almost disagree with myself, but I'm wondering if it shouldn't just be, okay, you can specify a config map, secret, or a volume end. You can't just do any old KS thing. I don't know. It's just a suggestion. Yeah,
that could be a restriction, just to make people, as you say, like move to the OEM specification and don't.
Yeah, because I don't like to lock people down at all. But then we're here to do OEM apps, right? People will avoid it if they can just slam in Kubernetes.
Well, it depends on the type of people. Some of them will try to bypass, let's say, the maybe want to bypass things.
I'm not even convinced by my own argument it should go to a vote, whatever. But I think, yeah, it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think also it depends on how we see this. Like, for example, if we start thinking about, let's have this compatible with add-ons and other stuff, maybe there is also a need for creating roles and things like that are more packageable, if that word exists as a Kubernetes raw entity. But yeah, I agree with you. We should discuss like which is the extent of that freedom in that sense.
Yeah, you make a good point with roles as well. But then as that list gets so long, it's so hard to then you just do what you like.
Everything but deployment pods, everything but things that generate pods. That really like the
all except maybe you can do anything except a deployment or a pod.
Daniel, very good proposal. I have a very lot of questions, but I think this is too long for this session. I think I will comment on that talk, and things such like if we should contain Kubernetes entities is really worth discussing. And I think we can also extend something more, just something like the application API. In the metadata for discovery and so things like the maintainer of the application, the owner of the application, and something others in the application metadata. And the parameter questions is also worth discussing. In some cases, you will always need to have some parameters, such as the deploy context. So I think we can launch a new meeting next time, and after we fully think of this doc and commented on that.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks for this great proposal.
I think it's a good idea to have to let people be able to read this with their time. Moreover, because some of people are not attending this meeting today. So yeah, take the time for everyone to digest what is said here, and let's start discussing the disagreements and agreements. An extension, as you say, like, yeah, I'm sure that the metadata can contain a lot more information that is useful, as you say, maintainers, owners, things like that. So yeah. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, and actually, I have very small questions to add to that. Yeah, so I think it is very interesting for the proposal to mention that one of the scenario is to use GitOps to manage the application, and so for the first glance, I think it is possible to do that, but I think there is a lot of details to be settled down to launch the catalog proposal into the GitOps solution. And I'm curious if there is anything like Naptive has put into practice that using the catalog as the GitOps source and to do such pattern for the DevOps.
Not, the answer is like, is not yet available. We are thinking on it, but at this point we are focusing on other stuff on the platform. But it's something that we feel like this came, as I say, from discussion with some enterprises, that some of the control, let's say, that you have or you gain with having a registry with versioning applications, they don't have that on the application level. And it's difficult for some people to have access to a list of applications that is available or produced by the company. And if you want to deploy some application and somebody is not there, they sometimes have also a hard time trying to find which is the source of the YAMLs and how to customize them, if you wish. So that's come from that, but there is nothing available right now about this.
Yeah, anyway, I think it is cool to mention that, and
sure,
yeah, we can discuss it in details later. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. I think there is no much more questions for the proposal, and I think we have discussed for some time, and also we have used the incorrect time for today's meeting, and sorry again for that. So I think I will just delay the second agenda about guide for the load testing and the monitoring for the KubeVela system in the next committee meeting. And thanks all. And if there is any questions, we can follow up on the Slack channel and on the GitHub issue as well. Okay. Thanks, Daniel, and thanks everyone for the participation.
Bye. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Thanks,
See you next
bye-bye.
meeting. Yeah.